Jaylen Brown is an all-star. I've got some thoughts on where Jaylen has come over the course of his career. Then Kelly Olynyk rumors. It's more complicated than people are making it. And then later on, I talked to the director of a new Bill Russell documentary coming out next week. It's all right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And I'm here for you every day with a free, fresh podcast dropped directly to your device if you're a subscriber. So make sure you've hit that subscribe button. It doesn't matter which app you use. This podcast exists on all of them. It's also on YouTube, so you can watch. You can join people in the comments, having a lot of fun conversation there, going back and forth about the Celtics, about the podcast in the comments. So hop in there. I do thank you for making this podcast your first listen every day. I very much appreciate that. I'm John Karalis. I used to play professional basketball a long time ago. Now I cover the Boston Celtics for Boston Sports Journal. Today's show, third segment, I talked to Sam Pollard, who directed a two-part documentary on Bill Russell that's coming out next week. That's going to be the third segment. Second segment, we'll talk about the Kelly Olynyk rumors. A rumor popped up thanks to Steve Bulpett on Heavy.com. I'll talk about it's the kind of big conversation, but I'll tell you the things that people aren't telling you. For some reason, I've read all the stories. There are some very major things here with this rumor, problematic things that I did not read anywhere. So I guess I'll have to be your source for that. But first, let's start with Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is an all-star. Officially, we knew it was going to happen, but it was officially announced on Thursday night that Jaylen Brown is one of the all-star reserves. So that means Jaylen Brown will be in Salt Lake with Jayson Tatum and the entire Celtics coaching staff. It's a very green-tinted all-star game. This is very cool. And first of all, first thing that pops into my head is, man, what a great opportunity to tamper. Because players and coaches, they get to, it's almost like passive tampering. Because when the coaching staff gets to hop into a locker room full of these guys and you get to show what this guy is about, show what Joe Mazzulla is about, show what it's like to play with him, for him, all of that stuff, you get a real sense and you get to put it out there to the rest of the league, especially for Joe, first-year head coach. You got to put it out there like, hey, this is what it's like playing in Boston. And Jaylen can be there to talk to guys and say, yeah, man, this is really cool. And Jayson can be there to talk to guys and say, yeah, this is actually a whole lot of fun. We're really having fun here in Boston, which is a very cool thing to be able to say. And you never know which one of these guys, when their contract is up, will say, hey, you know what? Actually, I think I would want to sign there. And I know you're probably saying, like, well, we can't sign anybody here, but in a couple of years, cap spike, you never know what's going to coincide with where cap spike goes up. Guys are going to, there might be money available. The whole league could have money available. These little things where you have two Celtics players, your two Celtics stars, and the entire coaching staff there kind of showing their stuff. Just saying, it could be a little thing where in 2-3 years, when one of these guys, one of these all-stars says, I'm looking for a new home. I remember the Boston, those guys seemed pretty cool. Let me check them out. Let me give them a call. Let me tell my agent I want to talk to Boston if they're interested. And that's all you want, the opportunity to talk to guys. So this is going to be a cool opportunity no matter what. But Jaylen making the all-star team, super cool. And I just want to say a couple of things about Jaylen Brown, just beyond the basketball, because he obviously deserves it. He's one of the best players in the league. I think he has a real chance to be an All-NBA player and get that the extra money in his contract, the 35% max, that will be good for him. But beyond that, I find Jaylen Brown to be a really fascinating guy because we kind of hinted at it a little bit with Tom a couple of days ago. We were talking about how his brain works and all of that. Very introspective. This has been a very introspective season for Jaylen Brown. He's talked a lot about his mistakes being in his own head. He's talked about being his own worst enemy. He's talked about thinking too far down the road and not being present in the moment in certain situations. And I just think that it's interesting that he has gone down that road this season when he looks at how his, kind of looks at his own path. By the way, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. When Jaylen talks about that stuff, I mean, that's a recognition. You know, the joke's the first step is admitting it. It's hard because Jaylen he's a thinker. And I know one of the criticisms coming into his career was he's too smart for the NBA, which is a very racially tinged criticism. But also in there is a kernel of truth in that he's smart and he is a thinker and he ponders the problems of the world. And he's his brain is just wired to constantly be thinking. And I do think that sometimes his brain constantly thinking gets in the way of just reacting and playing basketball. I've said it a million times, and every basketball coach will tell you, if you're thinking on the floor, you're done. And that's not to say that you can't bring the ball up and process and think. But when you see something on the floor, you should be seeing, okay, this guy's here. Here's my reaction. Oh, that guy's there. Okay, I'm going to do this. It's not thinking in the terms of, all right, I just kind of screwed up that last play. I got to come in. I got to be better on this play. And if I screw that up, then, I'm going to get into trouble. Man, I might get benched or it's going to be embarrassing to me. That's the thinking you can't have. But if you're a person like Jaylen, who is constantly saying, hey, this is a problem in the world. What if this? What if that? What if that? What if that? And let me tell you, I can relate to Jaylen in that sense because my brain works like that. And I had a hard time even when I was playing. Like the shutting off your brain and staying in the moment is difficult. It's one of the hardest things that NBA players have to do when you screw up, especially like, missing a couple of free throws, to put the game into overtime. When you miss shots, when you have opportunities to win a game and you don't, or you get cut back door and it's obvious it was your guy, it's easy to have that stuff cascade. The process that Jaylen has been going through, I think recently, of recognizing that has helped him kind of snap out of these things during the course of a game. And it's what partly has allowed him to be the player that he is, because when he gets out of his own head and plays basketball, he's awesome. He is just really, really good. When he tries to do too much and when his brain is clearly like messing with him a little bit, that's when he gets himself into trouble. But there's a balance for him. Like, you have to be able to be yourself and have that kind of thought process, but also find a way somehow to, okay, I'm between the lines. I'm turning into a different person. I'm turning into here and now guy, and can't let those things get into your mind, into your way. And I think he's doing a much better job of that this year. Like I just said, in the past, when he's had a bad game, when he's thinking and he's kind of out of it early, you just know that that's just going to be a lost game for him. Now you might have a quarter or a few minutes here and there, but he's actually able to pull himself out of that. It's a big reason why he is as good as he is now. But it's incredible to watch his progression. Here's a guy that's just stepping into his prime. just stepping into his prime. You still don't know what he's capable of. That's the amazing part to me. Him and Tatum, you just don't know what they're capable of. And I can sit here and say, here's what I think right now. And for this season, what do I think he should be? There are certain things, but next season after that, what's he going to be? I don't know. I've learned a long time ago, you don't put Jaylen Brown in a box, and I'm not going to do that. Congratulations to Jaylen Brown for becoming an all-star. And I, as a journalist, a person whose job, journalism is in the name, you can see it. I'm keeping a journal of events. My job is to keep a journal of events that you see every day for the Celtics. And having been around Jaylen Brown for many years and basically covering him from day one, either outside of the team, like as a blogger or a podcaster or a freelance writer, to now doing it full time, I'm really fascinated by his growth and who he's becoming as a person and as a player. It's amazing. All right, up next, Kelly Olynyk rumors. I'm going to slow down and try to say that more clearly next time. Kelly Olynyk rumors. People are talking about it. They're not telling you the full truth. Why it is super, super complicated. And I'll just get into that next. First, today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. I grew up in a small business. My dad used to own restaurants. Of course, I'm Greek. That's what we do. I was also at one point a hiring manager, so I had a pile of resumes on my desk. I know how hard it is to get the right people in the door so I can weed through the candidates and find the exact person that I need. Well, LinkedIn Jobs actually helps quickly attract these qualified candidates to the jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, your company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Then you can identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them for fast and for free. And LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy for you to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications. It's all on one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. This is exactly what you need if you're hiring. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. Make Locked On Game to Game your second listen. It's on the Locked On NBA feed, so if you're subscribed to that, you're subscribed to Locked On Game to Game. Give both a listen. Game to Game is going to get you an update on every game. Both sides of the story, get caught up on the night in the league very quickly and get the full story. It's on Locked On NBA, on the Locked On NBA feed. Check it out where you get your podcast. Also on YouTube. All right. My guy, Steve Bulpett, put out a story on Heavy.com on Thursday that Kelly Olynyk is drawing some interest from the Boston Celtics. Okay, that's great. Kelly Olynyk is a decent player, stretch five. Teams want him. Sure. Celtics want him. Sure. Lots of interest. Celtics have interest in a lot of guys. But there are complications. And unfortunately, there are a ton of rumors out there, or a ton of stories about this one rumor, I should say, that don't tell you the whole story. They tell you, hey, they're interested in Kelly Olynyk, and it might take a few guys to get to him. We'll see if it happens. But they're not telling you the downside or why it's not even likely to even get to that point. Here's why. Kelly Olynyk makes $12.8 million. $12.8 million. So right away, there's no traded player exception that the Celtics can take him into. So that's one avenue that's out. They can't do the Gallinari and Pritchard combination for two reasons. He makes more money than that combination can bring in, and Utah has a full roster right now. Now, it's possible that Utah can make some deals and structure their deals in a way, if they're making other moves, to open up roster spots. So right now, it's still possible. in the grand scheme of things. But the rule is you have to have enough spots on your roster to take in all of the guys you're trading for. Doesn't matter if you're cutting them right away. You can't have a full 15-man roster and make a 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 or 4-for-1 trade. It doesn't matter if you're cutting all those other guys. They have to fit on your roster first, and then they get cut. So Kelly Olynyk to Boston as a standalone deal right now, as it stands, can't happen because Boston would have to trade 3 guys, Gallinari, Pritchard, and Justin Jackson, to Utah for Olynyk. They are full. They have a full roster. They don't have open spots. So they cannot take more than 1-for-1. Never mind the fact that, are they even interested in Peyton Pritchard? Do they even care about the return? Is it about draft picks, or are they actually looking to get guys back? No one's talking about this part of this. All they're saying is, hey, Kelly Olynyk, and he has these skills, and maybe you would take these guys and you can match salaries this way. And yeah, you can match salaries this way, but the Celtics have only limited options. I don't think Utah would take that trade, even if they could do it. Why would you take back Pritchard and Gallinari and Justin Jackson? Justin Jackson doesn't play. He was on the summer league team trying to get back into the league. He's not that good. Gallinari is kind of toast. He's got 1 more year on his contract, might have 1 more year left in him. After that ACL injury, I don't know how much he has left. He's like veteran guy. At that point, the Celtics might as well just keep him. Veteran guy on a good team. Can give you whatever minutes next year, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. Utah, they're not in a spot to take him. Peyton Pritchard, there's some interest in Peyton Pritchard in general, but we just got to accept that the league doesn't value him as much as we in Boston might want to value him. The league doesn't value him that highly. He's a nice player. He's a nice player. But matching $12.8 million is difficult, and the Jazz don't have the roster spots to make it happen. And on top of it, in the piece, there's a source that tells Bullpet, I doubt that will happen. What? It's right in there. Olynyk is a guy they have interest in, but I doubt that will happen, the source told him. Both teams are talking about the Celtics in Miami have had Olynyk interest in getting him back, but I didn't think that will happen. Just like I don't think a move for Jakob Poeltl will happen either. I mean, there are people here talking, and in the middle of the stories, it's like, yeah, it's not going to happen. But people are like, oh my God, Kelly, did you hear Kelly Olynyk might happen? And within the piece, it's like, probably not though. But everybody's like, oh yeah, man, Kelly, what would it take to get Kelly? And in the piece, no, I don't know, man. You probably shouldn't react that way. But the trade rumors are out there. Wow, bump them up. This is why I hate this time of year, actually. You love it. I get it. I'm not trying to piss on your parade. You love it. And I'll give you all the trade content, but I'm going to give it to you the real way and not the fake way. The Celtics are going to have a tough time making a deal because they only have limited traded player exception, $5.89 million. That's the Dennis Schroeder one. They have the disabled player exception, $3.2 million for Danilo Gallinari. And they have a combination of assets, trade players that they can trade, Gallinari, Pritchard, Justin Jackson. That gets you to about $12.5 million, $12.8 million or so. That gets you there. Grant Williams, probably not going to be traded. I don't think he's going to be traded. Rotation guys, not going to be traded. End of bench guys are going to move, potentially. That's it. That's all the Celtics have. So brace yourselves. Maybe Brad Stevens has a surprise up his sleeve. He tends to be one of those GMs or presidents of basketball operations that have the ability to keep things quiet, have good control over the front office and what leaks and what doesn't. So when it's super quiet, sure, when it's super quiet, you think, well, it's not much happening. But also with Boston, you might think, G's operate in silence like lasagna. So that's possible that Stevens could pull off a thing, and you can try to pull off an Olynyk move with 3 or 4 teams. But once you get past 2 teams, it's difficult. If you listen to Brian Windhorst on the Hoop Collective, he's been saying it a lot recently. A 3-team deal is a no team deal. And he's absolutely right. Of course, he's Brian Windhorst. But once you get into 3-team deals, it's too complicated. It gets extraordinarily complicated. And for a guy like Olynyk, now 3-team deals happen when big monster names are involved, and then other ancillary pieces are involved, and a team with some space can hop in and be like, yeah, I'll take the salary dump if you want to give me a trade, a draft pick. Yeah, I'll be the 3rd team in a deal. That's how 3-team deals happen. Or you don't have a roster spot. You have this useful player. I have cap space and need for a useful player. I'll be your 3rd team. That's how 3-team deals happen. 3-team deals for Kelly Olynyk, so someone can take Peyton Pritchard, and someone else can take and cut Justin Jackson. Nah, that's not going to happen. Plus, the Jazz are over the cap, so they have more limited options as well. They can't just absorb salary. Well, the lesson here is it's very difficult. I am trying to be real with you. I'm trying to give you the real facts so you can approach these trade deadlines with the right information so you don't fall for these traps. A lot of people, a lot of editors are out there saying they're looking at page views and they want their writers to write about certain things because they get page views, right? That's the real thing that's happening. You put Boston Celtics trade rumors, Kelly Olynyk, blah, blah, blah. That is going to get hits on Google. That's going to get people clicking. And that's why these stories are being written. And that's why you're not being told all of the reasons it won't happen. They need you to believe it will happen. Luckily, my boss doesn't say, hey, write this up and just blow it. Because that's one of the advantages, honestly, of being behind the paywall. I can actually dismiss certain things and say, this isn't happening. I can actually be real with people. So thankfully, that's the case. Little plug for my gig at Boston Sports Journal. That's why you see a lot of rumors out there, because there are editors. A lot of these writers who write them don't want to write that stuff. They don't want to write that. They have to. They're told to, because you are thirsty for information and they want to feed you all that stuff. You're going to click, 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 and they're going to get all the ad revenue. That's why there's so many people out there talking about it. That's the real story. All right. There's a new documentary out about Bill Russell, about Bill Russell. Up next, I'm going to talk to the director of that documentary. It's a great conversation. That is coming up next. First, we are very excited to welcome FanDuel Sportsbook to the Locked On family. It's the only app you need for your Super Bowl party. It's the number one sportsbook. We're the number one podcast network, so it makes absolutely perfect sense. You're not a member? Great. That's actually good, because now you get to take advantage of some great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now. You can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. You can bet on a lot of things like money line or point spreads or who scores the first touchdown, which I like the prop bets. I'll be honest, I don't follow football closely enough to know, a lot of the nuance. I'm like, hey, let's have some fun with it. Let's take these prop bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, super easy to use. Best of all, when you win, you get paid instantly. That's awesome. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's really important. You got to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57 at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Please gamble responsibly. Coming out on February 8th on Netflix, 4 days ahead of Bill Russell's what would have been 89th birthday, is a new documentary called Bill Russell Legend. It's a 2-part documentary, again, released on February 8th, so next week on Netflix. It's directed by Sam Pollard. I had the privilege to talk to Sam Pollard about the documentary. Sam, thank you very much for joining me here. This is exciting. Another documentary on Bill Russell. I know I and people like me we can't wait to consume more Bill Russell content. What is it about this documentary that is going to separate itself from the past content? What's different in this one?
I think the big difference, John, is that we're getting an opportunity to see Bill Russell on the court and off the court. We get your opportunity to see Bill Russell, probably one of the greatest defensive centers of all time. And we're getting an opportunity to see Bill Russell, civil rights and human rights activist who went to Jackson, Mississippi to support Charles Evers after the death of his brother, Meg Evers. We have an opportunity to see Bill Russell dealing with the Boston busing issue in the late 60s. We get an opportunity to see Bill Russell, at the March on Washington in 1963 to support Dr. King. We see Bill Russell going to Cleveland to support and understand why Ali had refused to go into the draft. We're looking at a man who was a wonderful team player, loved his team, but also was a Black man in America who knew he had to stand up and stand out.
That's the dichotomy of Bill Russell, especially in Boston, where he was obviously the greatest champion that we've ever seen. But on the personal side, his relationship with the city of Boston was always strained to the point where he didn't want to come back and get his number retired publicly, right, and all of that. What in this talks about that element of Bill Russell, who wore Boston on his chest to win and play basketball, versus Bill Russell, who lived in Boston and had to deal with a lot of the things that he was fighting on a personal level?
Yeah, for him, listen, he comes into the team in the late 50s. And even though they had, the Houdini of the hardwood, in Bob Cousy, the Celtics couldn't win a championship. And what does Russell enable his team to do? Enables them to become champions. But what does Bill Russell have to hear? Even though he's become the linchpin of this team, most of those diehard Boston fans, the one they think the greatest player of all time on that team is who? Bob Cousy. So they had to rankle Bill Russell. And then here's a man who moves out to Reading, Mass, buys a house, and he has to struggle with the racism in the community. Someone breaking into his house, defecating in his family bed. And when he decided to move to another house, people not embracing him, wanting to move into another house. So he had to constantly face this. Now, he loved being a Celtic. He says in this film time and time again, he loved his teammates. He loved being a member of the Celtics. He just didn't feel the warmth and the embrace of the Boston folks, the Boston people, which rankled him. That's why he wouldn't attend when they decided to retire his number. But as I said in previous other interviews, like a lot of people, he mellowed as he got older. He mellowed. I mean, he let a statue be built, created about him in Boston, so he couldn't have been so angry with these fans by the end of his life.
I mean, yeah, over the course of time, that has certainly, like you said, mellowed. I do think the what he faced during his playing days was really interesting, and not only because of the racism he faced, but because of the stances that he took. It's one thing to face racism; it's another thing to stand up to racism and fight it the way he did, and that just puts more of a target on his back, right?
Exactly, because listen, he was told back then, as you remember a few years ago, someone told LeBron James to shut up and play, because they see athletes as people who don't have any minds, don't have any intelligence. They just know how to get on a baseball field or a football field or a basketball court or play the game, just play the game. And, even back then, there were teammates on other teams, players on other teams who wouldn't speak out like a Bill Russell? I don't think Earl Monroe or Walt Frazier, they spoke out like Bill did. I mean, look at compare, which we dig into the personality of a Will Chamberlain and the personality of a Bill Russell. Bill Russell was front and center. It's about being an activist, about speaking out. Will Chamberlain was just about Will Chamberlain,
Mm-hmm.
And and I know in the history of this game, there are lots of basketball players who are the same way. But for every Bill Russell, there's a LeBron James who speaks out or a Chris Paul who speaks out.
Yeah.
There's players who will speak up and speak out and not worry about the consequences.
Yeah, that's the inspirational part of Bill Russell. And I know you talked to in the documentary current players, including Jayson Tatum, currently playing for the Celtics, about the inspiration. I mean, look, Bill once, when he was faced with racism in a game in the South, took the black players and left
in Kentucky.
Yeah, and that is an incredible stance to take, and that story's been relayed many, many times. Fast forward to today, where today's athletes are facing a lot of social issues that they're trying to take on. The biggest one was the George Floyd, where that led to a lot of protests in the bubble and all of that. What inspiration did you see from the current players that they drew from the actions and the words of Bill Russell?
Well, what they drew is that you could speak out. You have to be responsible for who you are, not just as a player, but as a human being. And they understood that. I mean, these players who were speaking out and standing up about what happened with George Floyd, they're standing on the shoulders of Bill Russell. They understood that there's a responsibility you have as a sports figure. It's not just to play the game, not just to sign autographs, but when certain things happen in this country, you need to have a voice. You need to speak up and speak out.
This documentary features the final interview of Bill Russell's life. What can you tell us about that interview? Just in general.
Yeah, I would say this, that at that stage of his life, many of the memories that Bill Russell spoke about in that interview were memories like, this, John, when you get older, what do you start thinking about? The things you remember from your long ago past.
Yeah.
So some of the things Bill was talking about was things that happened to him at USF, things that happened to him in high school, the fact that when he graduated, when he got out of college, the Globetrotters approached him about becoming a Globetrotter, and he refused. His father said, "My son will never play for the Harlem Globetrotters." Those are the things that was in his mind. He wasn't as, I'll use this delicately, he wasn't as coherent about present day stuff as he might have been 4 or 5 years before.
Sure. But it's always going to be great to hear from Bill. I know we, especially now thinking back on his legacy, now that he's passed, it's to hear his words one more time is going to be both touching and inspiring for people in Boston. What's the thing that when people are done with this documentary, I know it's a 2-part documentary, when they're done, what do you hope that people take away?
I hope they walk away saying, "Man, was he complicated."
And he was. It was complicated. And that's what made him great.
Because one of the questions I asked Steph Curry in the interview, what did you think of the fact that Bill wouldn't sign autographs? And Steph's response was, quite honestly, John, he said he didn't understand it because he believes that as a player, he does have a responsibility to sign autographs for fans because they buy tickets, they come out to see him, they buy his outerwear, they love him, so he feels that it's not a wrong thing for him to sign autographs. So he didn't quite understand why Bill Russell didn't sign autographs because he does it, I mean, that's what shows his whole rationale about his breakup with Will Chamberlain and how it didn't really bother him that they weren't talking for years. That says a lot about this guy. He's kind of an ornery, complicated man.
But he needed that shell. He needed that thing to
protect himself.
Through. Yeah. I mean, when you go through what he's gone through, to kind of the story of him with Red Auerbach is so interesting because up until Red, that was the relationship that with a coach, they could finally say, oh, this guy's actually into me for me and just who I am and what I am as a player. Right. And that's, I think Red is the first coach that he came across that said, you do you, we'll figure it out around you. And that's part of why he blossomed. It's the only place I can think of where he really truly opened up.
That's right. Because he did have a tremendous amount of respect for Red, and Red understood that he needed to be able to say, you do who you are, and we will build that team around you. And that's why when Red retired, they really couldn't find a coach. And that's why Bill became the one who would coach the team. Because no one could handle Bill Russell like Red Auerbach could.
That's amazing. Well, I'm honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing this. It comes out next week. I know everybody in Boston is going to be dying to see this. Sam Pollard, thank you so much for taking some time out to talk to me about this.
My pleasure, John.
Thank you again to Sam Pollard, award-winning director and director of Bill Russell, Legend, the definitive telling of the remarkable life and legacy of an NBA superstar and civil rights icon. This is going to be fun and informative and just amazing. It releases on February 8th on Netflix. It's a 2-part documentary, Bill Russell Legend. Check that out. I do appreciate you checking out this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're still here and you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the show. I'll be back with a bonus podcast post Suns. Hopefully they treat the Suns the same way they did the last time, and we can have some fun with that show as well. It'll be a little bit more informal show. The bonus shows tend to be a little quicker, 15, 20 minutes, a little bit more just direct. Let's get in, let's get out. But it'll be a bonus podcast for you so you can listen over the course of the weekend. You'll need something to listen to if you're in the Northeast this weekend. Oh my God, it's going to be like 50 below. So I'll give you something to listen to while you're sitting in front of the fire or hopefully staying warm. Please stay safe, everybody. Stay warm. And thank you for listening to the Locked On Celtics podcast, watching the Locked On Celtics podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.